Thank you for joining us for another informative session of Coffee Talk. Today we'll be discussing EU EUDAMED access and some updates. We're joined by John Lawrence and Gary Stainer, who are going to tell us all we need to know. John, Gary, take it away.
All right, well, thank you very much. Today we'll get started on the Coffee Talk conversation. We're going to focus our attention today on the European Union EUDAMED access. This is the database, and there's obviously a lot of data that needs to be transferred into that database, but there's been some limits in the actual accessibility to that. So John and I are going to kick around that topic. And John, I have a couple of questions for you. We'll kind of do a Q&A here. What is, or first of all, who is affected? You know, this is the old question. The newspaper reporter shows up and say, you know, who's involved in this particular issue?
Yep. So the folks impacted by this issue with the access points are any EU EUDAMED actors with multiple EUDAMED SRNs that would be utilized for submitting information to the EUDAMED database. And with that would come any third-party vendors. So third-party vendors such as RETEC, which would be making submissions to the EUDAMED database via machine-to-machine on behalf of EU clients.
Okay, so we kind of know who the players are. Then the question is, you know, what is the issue? It appears as though there's some connections issue for certain scenarios for those parties.
Correct. And starting off with showing who is not impacted by this is the organizations with a single SRN. So this would mean you're in a manufacturer loading device data into EUDAMED via machine-to-machine. If you have a single SRN that's associated with your access point, you should be fine. You should be fine with able to make submissions, get your acknowledgements. However, the organizations with multiple SRNs, this could be, you know, medical device company that has either some system procedure packs and also some traditional devices, and just because of that, you're going to end up having two SRNs, or perhaps some larger organizations that have multiple operating, you know, companies, franchises, multiple SRNs. They're unable to submit via machine-to-machine to EUDAMED via the single access point, which is what they should be having, is a single access point to submit the information for all of their associate SRNs. So the first example and illustration at top is what we see that is acceptable and supported right now. Again, the one manufacturer SRN, the one access point, that works fine. The second example here is illustrating, okay, this would be manufacturer, two manufacturer SRNs trying to go through the single access point. That will not work. And then lastly, of course, is like the third party example, which would be, you know, many manufacturers with unique SRNs being unable to go through the single third party access point connection to EUDAMED.
Yeah, we certainly experienced that in the third example down there with RETEC acting as a third party. But I would believe that there's a number of manufacturers out there that just because of different physical addresses and in different roles, they will have multiple SRNs, and it could be problematic for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the other question that pops up in regard to this is, you know, when did all this come about? When did it start? Do we expect it to be resolved at some point in time?
Yep. So, I mean, ultimately, I feel like there's always been an issue with the access point connections for submitting for multiple SRNs. So I'm saying going back years, right? So when we had our access point set up for pre-production very early on, that was before the EUDAMED UI was even in place that would support access point setups. So that has been working, quote, fine, but ever since we've been working to promote that in the production, we started experiencing some significant delays from the commission on what we were trying to do. And though we weren't getting a lot of good explanations as to why, But it was in the November-December timeframe of last year, which they started coming out and identifying an issue that they have on their end. And so started really being forthcoming that, okay, yes, there's an issue with being able to support a single access point for multiple SRNs that impacts third parties or larger manufacturers. And they also identified that there was some security issues actually within the access point configuration. And the existence of that security issue actually could have gave the illusion that submitting for multiple SRNs in a through a single access point was working fine, when in fact it was an issue where they weren't checking the association of the access point with the SRN, and this whole mess of things was uncovered. So there was an announcement where they were shutting down the machine-to-machine connection entirely in production as well as pre-production. But then in February, they rolled out a temporary workaround that will not go farther than pre-production. This temporary workaround is not going to go into production. It's because essentially they laxed on some security check in pre-production Playground, which would allow for continued testing of the machine-to-machine submission structure, format, and all that good stuff, while they're working on the true solution, the permanent fix to the access point configuration issue. Because as you can see here, they have late April as their target to have the permanent fix in pre-production Playground. Once that's released, we're going to have to assess and go, okay, is this aligned with original design for how the access point's configured and the submission header information is identified, or are folks going to have to make some tweaks to conform to the permanent fix that they put in place? So on that day that fix is released, it's not just going to magically work unless the commission finds a way to do it that requires no work from anyone, and that would be great. But I'm not going to go in expecting that. And then, of course, after that is done, they're looking for testing of a couple different scenarios. We've been very involved with the testing with the commission during this period, and we plan to continue to do so, with the goal of in mid-May that they would be able to roll this out to production and completely put this production machine-to-machine access point issue to bed. Yeah. So not too far from now, about a few months, and we could finally have this behind us.
All right, very good. Let's cross our fingers. Hope all that comes about. That looks like a good outlook. Any other recommendations or other information that comes to mind in discussing this topic? Anything what would you recommend going forward? Put it that way.
Yeah, I'd certainly monitor these EU Commission notices that come out about the EUDAMED updates, because that's where some of these tidbits of information do come out, and we do know that the Commission will be heads down developing through the rest of the remainder of this year, and all throughout the year they certainly can make some sort of changes that could have some impact. Of course, we at RETEC will look at any of those changes and update folks accordingly, but it's good practice to be on those distributions as well. Test out the upgrades. So as mentioned with the timeline on the previous slide, with as the enhancement fix starts becoming available, we also will have some notifications, so if folks could go ahead and start testing out the new way of submitting. So if you've already submitted in pre-production single source over to Playground, you're still going to want to do that again, because we'll be making changes to how that's configured, due to those changes. And again, lastly, we anticipate that this is going to be the final closure on this issue. So I know it's been a point of a frustration for many over the past year or so, where you can only take it so far, and machine to machine submitting folks are having some challenges to submit to EUDAMED. So I think that's great news that we have a solution identified by the commission and a time frame. That alone is huge progress into where we were at this time last year.
Right. So that does have some effects on ReadTech. I think you mentioned that those pre-production values probably would need to be resubmitted using this new connection. Can you just talk just for a second about how the ultimate approach would be, this hierarchy and architecture between ReadTech and EUDAMED, with the two levels like a playground and production? I believe once everything is repaired with this connection, this model then would be up and running for all connections, correct?
That's correct. Yep. So right now, what's fully in place is the pre-production UAT system access point connection to EUDAMED Playground. Again, as mentioned, there's that workaround in there, which is not it's not the final solution, and it's not going to move to production. And in late April, we'll get that fix in that second environment there. That playground update will be applied. We'll be updating our pre-production system to adhere to it. And upon successful testing of that, we'll go ahead and make the promotion in the production once it's been successfully verified. But we wouldn't be able to do that until mid-May at the earliest.
The outlooks looks pretty good, John. Thank you for setting aside some time and kicking around this topic with me. If you have further questions or need some any additional information, please feel free to connect up with ReadTech Life Sciences team there with the links, email, phone, and by way of the website. And so thank you very much. Gary Sainer, John, signing off. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.